Hello, everyone. My name is Camden Tadenhorst, and I'm a sophomore at Kansas State University. I'm a news and sports media major, and today I'll be talking to you about Chapter 6 in two different books. The first one being Canceling of the American Mind, and the second one being called You Make the Call. So we'll go with You Make the Call, Chapter 6 first. This talks about Drew Brees. A little bit of a bad story on Drew Brees. He's a former NFL quarterback, and he was a very good one. He has tons of NFL passing records um, with the Saints. And he wasn't just a great passer off the field. The book describes him as a great family man, a great um, person in the locker room, and he did a lot of community service work in the city of New Orleans, especially after Hurricane Katrina. He really brought that city back up. So back in 2020, he was asked by Yahoo, 9 days after George Floyd's death, what his thoughts were on field protests during NFL games when the national anthem was playing. So Brees said, I will never agree with anybody disrespecting the flag of the United States of America or our country. I envision my two grandfathers who fought for this country during World War II, both risking their lives to protect our country and to try to make our country and this world a better place. I don't think Breeze really meant much harm by this quote, but it wasn't perceived the best by the United States. A lot of athletes were very outspoken with Breeze and disagreed with his thoughts on the whole on-field protests. Athletes like LeBron James, Richard Sherman, and even some of his New Orleans Saints teammates. So Breeze felt like he was put up against the wall and felt like he needed to kind of restore his image. That's where we go to our next slide. Um, and the kind of need for him to restore his image was, well, the world has changed since 2016. Kind of back in 2016, the NFL owners threatened players who kneeled during the national anthem, but they really welcomed it in 2020. And just the country overall had more solidarity and intolerance towards racism, and they didn't feel like Breeze's comments were with that. So he felt like he needed to engage in image restoration work to repair his public persona. So a man named William Benott, he wrote a book talking about image restoration, and he suggested kind of when athletes make a kind of a statement that doesn't it's not perceived the best, they issue an apology. And they issue a message that attempts to repair their image. So this guy wrote a book talking about image restoration, and he had five primary strategies that people use in their apologies to try to uh, get the nation um, kind of back with them. So these strategies are denial, evading responsibility, corrective action, which is kind of bowing to help fix the problem, reducing offensiveness, and mortification, which is admitting you are wrong and asking for forgiveness. So Breeze issued an apology. He issued a short apology that was posted on social media accounts, followed by a video the next day. Um, in his apology, they used the image repair theory to interpret the apology and all the techniques Breeze used in his statement. So 32% of this his apology, he used the offensiveness strategy, reducing offensiveness strategy. He said, I stand with the black community. I have always been an ally. 24% of his apology he used mortification, which is, he said in his apology, it breaks my heart to know the pain I have caused. Basically asking for forgiveness from the black community from that statement. And the third one that he used the most was accountability. He showed 10% shared accountability, which he basically said he hasn't done enough for the black community and he promises to do more. He also says he needs to listen more and talk less. So a little bit of aftermath of this apology. He's not going to please everyone, of course. People are going to still agree with what he said, and people are also going to accept the apology. Um, Teammates like Michael Thomas and Cameron Jordan accepted this apology, but President Trump had issue with him coming out with an apology in the first place. So this chapter kind of talked about what celebrities and athletes what they do to kind of restore their image as a whole. So in the second book, in Canceling of the American Mind, the authors talked about the idea of the perfect rhetorical fortress. This is where people on the left side, tune out what conservatives say. It's kind of similar to the other book, and where people pull out all the stops to discredit people's thoughts. So like people on the left have these biases towards people, and sometimes don't even let people hear their arguments out. So some examples of barricades or thoughts they have about people are is the speaker conservative? What's the speaker's race? What's the speaker's sex? What's the speaker's sexuality? And more. The author talks about 12 different barricades that people have. Obviously, not everyone has these barricades towards people, and also the right has the same thing towards the left that the author said will be talked about in chapter 8. So the author talks about an example of the fortress in action being put to use. This was at Stanford Law School when they invited a federal appeals court judge, Kyle Duncan. He was slated to speak at the Stanford's Law School chapter of the Federalist Society. He's a socially conservative and evangelical Christian, and he was nominated by President Trump for the appeals court. I have to say, whoever invited Duncan is not the smartest in the world, as I'm not for sure how they didn't see what happens coming. So students kind of went to town on Duncan, and it became a disaster as a whole. Every time Duncan opened his mouth, students shouted over him using one of those rhetorical fortress barricades that people used, and shouting accusations out like, "Do you want people to die from COVID and more?" Um, Duncan was told beforehand that if anything were to escalate, an administrator were to kick them out. Instead, there was an administrator named Dean Steinbach. She did not do any of this. Duncan tried looking for her, but didn't recognize her at first. So protesters and students, they thought that was kind of a bad look. A student shouted at Duncan, asking him if he knew women should be administrators too. So instead of stopping all these shouting matches, that every time Duncan talked, people would just harass this guy. Steinbach made it even worse with stating her own opinion on him. Uh, Duncan tried to give his speech, but it was just a complete disaster. Steinbach and Duncan went back and forth, but in the end, Steinbach was placed on administrative leave, and Duncan was received an apology from the university president. So really, nothing good of this speech. Duncan was kind of just harassed the whole time, and the students of Stanford never really heard Duncan's thoughts on anything. They had these biases going in that they just would never let go. So the biggest difference between these two chapters and the stories were the willingness of Drew Brees' critics to listen to his apology and accept it, whereas Stanford's law students didn't want to hear Duncan's opinion at all. There's kind of already a bias going into the speech with Duncan that the students didn't want to give up. It's okay to not agree with someone's thoughts, but not even hearing their view on things. It's why we're kind of having some struggles, and as in the country as a whole. And that'll do it for my presentation. Thank you for listening, and have a great night.